Welcome back. This week we're going to talk about how to load electronic data files into Python. So before we get into loading modern files into our modern and fancy operating environment, let's talk about how things used to be. Through the 1970s, data was stored on punch cards just like this one. And it was kind of an adventure to do any kind of data analysis whatsoever. I have professors that I worked with in graduate school who would tell me these horror stories about putting all of their dissertation data onto punch cards that look just like this, and then walking across their university campus at 3 in the morning, which would have been the only time they could get time on the university's mainframe, and then feeding the cards in one after another really slowly in a very hot, very, very loud room in the basement somewhere, and then praying that none of the cards got stuck, because then you had to go and talk to the really grumpy tech to go deal with that. So imagine the image of a grad student walking across campus in the middle of the night with a huge stack of punch cards, and that is how data used to be. In the late 70s and then in the 80s, it became possible to store data directly on a computer hard drive, but space was really limited. And then we also had some portable things like floppy disks, and there were issues with those as well. Because space was so limited, there were universal standards adopted at that time. These were called the American Standard Code for Information Exchange, and it's pronounced ASCII, A-S-C-I-I. So if you ever see that acronym, it's pronounced ASCII. ASCII defines 128 characters to be legal in data files, and these are text files. So if you're using Windows, you can open these in Notepad, and if you're using Mac, you can open these in Text Editor. They're just text files with these 128 characters in them. And they're messy, but we have methods of dealing with them that we're going to talk about this week. They're designed to be as small as possible, given the storage constraints, and as universally portable as possible. And the data points inside of an ASCII file can be delimited, that means separated, one data point from the next, by a comma or a space or a tab or by another character. Sometimes there's no delimiter, but you have to use a separate file, a data dictionary, to read that data. And so today there are two common ways to access electronic data. Either you can work with an individual data file that you got through a website, through email, through hard storage, and they're often in ASCII format, but sometimes they're stored in proprietary formats, like an Excel file is a proprietary format, for example. The other way is through a local or remote relational database. That's a collection of many individual data sets with properties to assist with merging them together. And it's managed using a language like SQL, which we'll talk about later in this course. It's important to be very comfortable working with both of these methods because as a data scientist, you're going to be collaborating with a lot of people. Clients and teammates and everybody. And sometimes you'll be working with individual ASCII files, sometimes you'll be working with databases, sometimes you'll be working with something else. So you have to know both. We're going to go over the individual files today. We're going to go over databases really soon. So our task is to load ASCII files into Python, identify the ways in which that ASCII data is messy, and then create a tidy data set. And we're going to talk all about what tidy data means later in this course. But just to illustrate what we're talking about, this is a CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated. In comma separated values files, you could see that the individual data points are separated by commas. We have the variable names or the feature names on that first line, and then a carriage return right here. Carriage return means when you push return or enter on your keyboard. And then all the data points that match up to all of these features. And then a carriage return, then the second case and third and fourth, just like that. So this is what a comma-separated values file really looks like at root if you were to open it up in a text editor. Now, although the CSV format is universal, on many computers, sometimes CSVs open in Excel by default. But CSV files are not exclusive to Excel. It's like Microsoft went and said, oh, look, here's this universal data format. It must be an Excel file, and they just like co-opted it. Just a pet peeve of mine. Never mind, forget it. Anyway, this is a tab delimited file where it's the exact same data, but instead of commas, there are tabs in between the data points. Okay, so be ready to see tab delimited files as well. This is an ASCII file that is fixed width. It has no delimitation. It's the position of each data point in the columns, the number of spaces over from the left in this text file that denotes one feature from the next. So because of that, there's no way to tell where one feature begins and the next feature ends. There's no separation here. So you need a dictionary, variable 1, variable 2, that tells you what is this variable, what columns does it occupy.